The autumn rain hammered against the windows of the Harbor Grill, an upscale restaurant perched along Seattle's waterfront. Inside, the warmth of dimmed Edison bulbs and the murmur of affluent conversations created a cocoon against the Pacific Northwest's relentless October storm. Sarah Mitchell moved between tables with practiced grace, her black apron tied neatly around her waist, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 26, she'd been waiting tables for 8 years, long enough to read people before they even opened their mouths. Tonight was different, though. Marcus Brennan had reserved the entire back section. Everyone knew Marcus Brennan, real estate mogul, philanthropist to some, ruthless businessman to others. His face graced the business section of the Seattle Times regularly, always with that same calculated smile that never quite reached his steel-grey eyes. But it wasn't Brennan himself that had the entire staff on edge. It was Tank. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Tank was a 100-pound Pitbull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to assess everyone as either threat or irrelevant. The dog accompanied Brennan everywhere, a constant shadow that lounged beneath his table during business dinners. Restaurant managers rarely objected. Brennan's patronage was worth the accommodation, and he always cited Tank as a service animal, though no one believed it. The staff knew better than to approach when Tank was present. Last month, a busboy had gotten too close while clearing dishes, and Tank's growl had been enough to send the young man stumbling backward into a serving cart. Sarah had seen it happen. She'd also seen the way Brennan had simply continued his conversation, unbothered, while his companion across the table shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, you're on Brennan's section tonight," her manager David announced as she returned to the service station. His expression was apologetic. "I know it's not ideal, but you're the best we've got. Just keep your distance from the dog." She nodded, smoothing her apron. "I've handled worse." David's eyebrows rose. "Have you, though?" "Fair point." But Sarah had grown up on a farm in eastern Washington where animals were a constant presence. She'd bottle-fed calves, gentled skittish horses, and once talked down an aggressive rooster that had terrorized her younger brothers. A pit bull in a restaurant was just another Tuesday as far as she was concerned. Brennan arrived at 7:30 sharp, shaking rain from his charcoal overcoat. Tank trotted beside him, unleashed, moving with the disciplined precision of military training. The dog's coat was brindle, dark stripes against a tawny base, and his muscles rippled beneath the short fur. Several diners glanced nervously as the pair passed, and Sarah noticed one elderly woman actually pull her purse closer. "Good evening, Mr. Brennan," Sarah greeted as he settled into the corner booth. Tank immediately positioned himself beneath the table, his large head resting on his paws. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Brennan barely looked up from his phone. "Macallan 18, neat. And water for Tank, filtered, room temperature in a bowl, not a dish." "Of course." Sarah made note of the specific request, unsurprised. Men like Brennan didn't do anything without precision. She returned with the scotch and a ceramic bowl of water, setting the latter on the floor at a careful distance. Tank's ears perked forward, but he didn't move, waiting. Only after Brennan made a subtle hand gesture did the dog rise and lap at the water with surprising delicacy. "Are you expecting anyone else this evening?" Sarah asked. "Client meeting. Should be here shortly." Brennan finally looked at her, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You're new to this section." "Not new to the restaurant. Just new to your table." A ghost of a smile. "And Tank doesn't bother you, should he?" Brennan studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the distinct impression of being catalogued, filed away. "Most people cross the street when they see us coming. Most people judge books by their covers," Sarah replied evenly, then added, "I'll give you a few minutes with the menu." As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her back. Interesting. Marcus Brennan wasn't accustomed to being anything other than intimidating. The client arrived 20 minutes later, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit who introduced himself as Robert Chen. Sarah took their orders, ribeye for Brennan, salmon for Chen, and observed the dynamics at play. Chen was clearly out of his depth, fumbling with his napkin, laughing too loudly at Brennan's sparse comments. Tank remained a silent presence beneath the table, though Sarah noticed the dog's eyes tracking every movement Chen made. "Your proposals are ambitious, Robert," Brennan was saying as Sarah delivered their entrees. "Perhaps too ambitious." I've done the projections. The numbers work." Chen's voice cracked slightly. "Numbers always work on paper. Reality tends to be less cooperative." Sarah busied herself adjusting water glasses, sensing the tension. Chen was pitching something, probably a development deal, and Brennan was circling like a shark. "I just need the initial investment," Chen pressed. 18 months, you'll see returns." 18 months is a long time. Brennan cut into his steak with surgical precision. A lot can change in 18 months. Partners can disappear, projects can fail, investments can evaporate. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Chen's face had gone pale, his salmon untouched. Sarah moved to the next table, but her attention remained divided. There was something off about the whole interaction, the way Brennan wielded his words like weapons, the way Chen seemed to shrink with each passing minute. But it was Tank's behavior that truly caught her notice. The dog's body language had changed. His head was up, ears flat against his skull, and a low, almost inaudible whine emanated from his throat. Not aggressive, distressed. She'd heard that sound before, from her family's old border collie when thunderstorms approached. It was the sound of an animal in discomfort, trying to communicate something its human couldn't understand. The meal concluded with Chen practically fleeing the restaurant, his pitch clearly rejected. Brennan remained, nursing a second scotch, scrolling through his phone with Tank still positioned beneath the table. The dog's whining had grown slightly more pronounced, though Brennan seemed oblivious. Sarah approached with the check. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Brennan?" "No, just the bill." She hesitated, then said carefully, "Your dog seems uncomfortable." Brennan glanced down, frowning. "He's fine." "With respect, sir, I grew up around animals. That's a distress sound." His expression hardened. "I think I know my own dog." "Of course." Sarah set down the check and began clearing plates. As she bent to retrieve a dropped fork, she found herself at eye level with Tank. The dog's brown eyes locked onto hers, and that whine came again, more insistent. Without thinking, Sarah extended her hand slowly, palm up, letting Tank sniff. Several nearby diners gasped. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw David's horrified expression from across the room. But Tank didn't snap or growl. Instead, he pressed his massive head against her palm, that distress sound continuing. "He's trying to tell you something," Sarah said quietly, her hand gently exploring Tank's head and neck. The dog leaned into her touch, and then there. A small, hard lump beneath the fur, just behind his right ear. "Mr. Brennan, when did this appear?" Brennan was on his feet instantly, anger flashing across his face. "What are you—" "There's a growth here. Feel it." She guided his hand to the spot and watched as his anger transformed into something else. Concern. Fear. His fingers found the lump, and his jaw tightened. That wasn't there last week. Has he been acting differently, eating less, more tired? Brennan sank back into the booth, his hand now resting on Tank's head. "He's been off his food for a few days. I thought he was just being picky." Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities she'd learned growing up on the farm, from late-night sessions with veterinary manuals when their animals fell ill. It could be a lot of things, a cyst, an abscess, or... She didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what she wasn't saying. For the first time since he'd arrived, Brennan looked genuinely rattled. His composed mask had cracked, revealing something surprisingly human underneath. "There's an emergency vet clinic on East Lake. Do you know it? About 15 minutes from here." He stood abruptly, pulling out his wallet and throwing down several $100 bills. "Thank you. Thank you." As Brennan hurried out with Tank, the restaurant seemed to exhale collectively. David appeared at Sarah's elbow, eyes wide. "Did that just happen? Did you just pet Marcus Brennan's attack dog?" "He's not an attack dog," Sarah said, watching through the rain-streaked window as Brennan's black Mercedes pulled away, Tank visible in the passenger seat. "He's just a scared animal whose owner wasn't listening. The story should have ended there, a chance encounter, a good deed, forgotten by morning." But 3 days later, Sarah arrived for her evening shift to find an envelope waiting for her at the host stand. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. "Sarah, Tank had surgery yesterday to remove a tumor. The vet said if we'd waited another week, it would have been too late. The growth was malignant, but they got it all. He's recovering well. I don't thank people often, I'm not good at it, but you saved my dog's life, and that means something. Come by my office tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you can. I'd like to speak with you. Marcus Brennan." An address was printed at the bottom, a downtown high-rise overlooking Elliott Bay. David read over her shoulder and let out a low whistle. "Well, that's unexpected." Sarah stared at the note, unsure what to make of it. Men like Marcus Brennan didn't summon waitresses to their offices for casual conversation, but she was curious, and she'd never been one to shy away from uncertainty. "I'm off tomorrow afternoon," she said slowly. "Guess I'll find out what he wants." "Could be a job offer," David suggested. "Rich guys love having grateful people around. Or it could be nothing." But Sarah knew better. Nothing about Marcus Brennan was ever nothing. As she moved through her shift that evening, serving other tables and refilling water glasses, her mind kept returning to that moment in the restaurant. Tank's distressed whine, the feel of that lump beneath her fingers, and the look on Brennan's face when he'd realized what she'd found. The rain continued outside, Seattle's eternal autumn companion, and somewhere across the city, a Pitbull was recovering from surgery because a waitress had paid attention when no one else would. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only questions. The Brennan building dominated its block in downtown Seattle, all glass and steel angles that caught the gray afternoon light like a knife blade. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the 30-story tower, and wondered if she'd made a mistake coming here. She'd dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, settling on dark jeans, boots, and a cream sweater under her wool coat. Professional enough to be taken seriously, but not trying to be someone she wasn't. The lobby was intimidating. Marble floors, modern art installations that probably cost more than her car, and a security desk staffed by 2 guards who looked like they'd been hired for their ability to project menace while wearing suits. "I'm here to see Marcus Brennan," Sarah told the younger guard, feeling absurdly out of place. "He asked me to come at 2. The guard checked his tablet, eyebrows rising slightly. "Name?" "Sarah Mitchell." "ID, please." After scanning her driver's license, he handed it back with a keycard. 30th floor. Elevators are to your left. Someone will meet you up there." The elevator was glass-walled, offering a dizzying view of the city as it climbed. Sarah watched Seattle spread out beneath her, the Space Needle in the distance, Puget Sound gray and choppy, the Olympic Mountains barely visible through the cloud cover. She'd lived here her whole adult life, but seeing it from this height made it feel foreign, like looking at someone else's city. The 30th floor was quieter than she'd expected. Thick carpeting absorbed sound, and the few people she saw moving between offices spoke in hushed tones. A woman in her 40s, wearing a sharp black pantsuit, greeted Sarah as the elevator doors opened. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Catherine, Mr. Brennan's executive assistant. He's expecting you. Her smile was polite, but assessing. This way, please. They walked past conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, past walls displaying architectural renderings of various projects, apartment complexes, commercial buildings, mixed-use developments. This wasn't just an office, it was the command center of an empire. Catherine stopped at a set of double doors, knocked once, and pushed them open without waiting for a response. Marcus Brennan's office was exactly what Sarah expected. Enormous, minimalist, with a view that made the elevators seem modest. But what she didn't expect was Tank, lying on a large dog bed near the windows, wearing a cone around his neck and looking thoroughly miserable. Brennan stood from behind his desk, and Sarah was struck by how different he appeared in this setting. Still commanding, still sharp-eyed, but somehow more human without the restaurant's theatrical distance. "Sarah, thank you for coming." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Please sit. Can Catherine get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Catherine withdrew, closing the doors behind her. Brennan sat, but not behind his desk. Instead, he took the chair beside Sarah's, a subtle gesture that surprised her. "How's Tank?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the dog. "Complaining about the cone, but otherwise recovering well. The vet said the tumor was caught early enough that his prognosis is excellent." Brennan's expression softened as he looked at the dog. "Because of you. I just paid attention. Most people don't." He leaned back, studying her with that same cataloguing gaze from the restaurant. "I looked into you after that night. I hope you don't mind. It's a habit. Due diligence." Sarah felt a prickle of unease. "What did you find?" "That you grew up on a farm near Spokane. 3 younger brothers. Your parents still run the place, wheat and cattle. You came to Seattle 8 years ago for college, dropped out after a year when your father had a heart attack and needed help, worked various jobs to send money home until he recovered, never went back to school. Been at the Harbor Grill for 6 years, clean record, no debts beyond a modest car loan. You volunteer at an animal shelter on weekends." The recitation was delivered without judgment, but Sarah felt exposed nonetheless. "That's thorough. I like to know who I'm dealing with." Brennan paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You could have ignored Tank that night. Most people would have, but you got down on your knees in the middle of a restaurant and examined a dog that everyone else was afraid to approach. Why?" Sarah considered the question. "Because he needed help, and I could hear him asking for it. Seemed pretty straightforward." "Nothing straightforward. People always have motivations. Maybe. Or maybe sometimes people just do the right thing because it's right." She met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Brennan, I appreciate the thank you, and I'm glad Tank is okay. But I'm guessing you didn't ask me here just to tell me that." A genuine smile crossed his face, the first she'd seen from him. "You're direct. I like that. You're right. I have an offer for you." Here it came. Sarah braced herself, uncertain what to expect. "I need an assistant," Brennan continued. "Not an executive assistant. Catherine handles that role perfectly. I need someone who manages the aspects of my life that don't fit neatly into business categories. Tank is one of those aspects. My house is another. Scheduling personal appointments, handling household staff, managing deliveries, ensuring things run smoothly. A lifestyle manager, essentially." Sarah blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a significant career change. The position pays $80,000 a year to start, full benefits, and comes with flexible hours. You'd work from my home office most days, occasionally accompany me to events or meetings where Tank is present. You'd also coordinate with Tank's vet, trainer, and daily care. 80,000. Sarah's mind reeled. She made barely 35 at the restaurant, and that was with tips. Why me? She asked. You could hire a professional assistant, someone with experience. I could. I've tried. They last 6 months, maybe a year. They see the job as a stepping stone, a resume builder. They manage schedules efficiently, but treat everything like a transaction. He glanced at Tank again. You saw my dog suffering and responded with genuine concern, not because it would benefit you, but because you understood what he needed. That's not something I can find on a resume. Sarah's thoughts raced. It was an incredible opportunity, more money than she'd ever made, a chance to escape the endless grind of restaurant work. But working for Marcus Brennan would mean entering a world she didn't understand, dealing with pressures and expectations she couldn't anticipate. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. Take a week. Talk to anyone you want. Catherine can provide references from people I've worked with. I'm not looking to pressure you, but I think this could be good for both of us. And as if sensing his name being discussed, Tank lifted his head, spotted Sarah, and struggled to his feet despite the cone. He padded over slowly, pressed his head against her knee, and let out a contented sigh. Brennan watched the interaction with something like wonder. He never does that with strangers. Maybe he knows I'm not a stranger. Sarah scratched gently behind Tank's undamaged ear, careful to avoid the surgical site. We've got an understanding. Another reason you're perfect for this job. Sarah left the Brennan building with a business card containing Catherine's direct number and instructions to call with any questions. She walked for hours afterward, through Pike Place Market and along the waterfront, trying to process what had just happened. A week ago, she'd been serving expensive dinners to people who barely noticed her existence. Now, Marcus Brennan, one of the wealthiest men in Seattle, was offering her a position in his personal life. That evening, she called her mother from her small apartment in Ballard. "That's wonderful, honey," her mother exclaimed after hearing the details. "But are you sure? This Brennan man, isn't he the one they write about in the papers? The ruthless developer?" "He's complicated," Sarah admitted, "but he loves his dog, and that counts for something. Your father always said you could read animals better than people. Maybe you're reading him correctly too." After hanging up, Sarah sat on her threadbare couch, looking around the apartment she'd called home for 4 years. The walls needed painting. The heater rattled. The windows didn't quite seal, letting in drafts during winter. She'd grown comfortable here, in the predictable rhythm of her life. Work, sleep, volunteer at the shelter, occasional drinks with co-workers. It was safe. It was known. But it was also static. She'd been treading water for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to swim. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Catherine. Mr. Brennan wanted me to send you these." A series of photos followed. Tank sprawled on his bed, cone and all, his expression somehow managing to convey both dignity and annoyance. The last photo was different. Tank as a puppy, all oversized paws and ears, being held by a younger Brennan whose smile was unguarded and real. Sarah stared at that final image for a long time. Marcus Brennan, the intimidating mogul who made grown men stutter, cradling a tiny dog with obvious tenderness. People were never just one thing. They were contradictions, complications, layers upon layers of public faces and private truths. Maybe that was okay. Maybe it was even interesting. 3 days later, Sarah called Catherine and accepted the position. She gave the Harbour Grill 2 weeks' notice, worked her final shifts with a mixture of nostalgia and relief, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that she was diving headfirst into completely unfamiliar waters. David threw her a small going-away party on her last night, complete with a cake decorated to look like Tank. "We'll miss you," he said, raising a glass, "but honestly, you were too good for this place anyway." "I liked it here," Sarah protested, though she knew he was right. "You tolerated it here. There's a difference." David clinked his glass against hers. "Go be extraordinary somewhere that deserves you." "Make Cindy." Marcus Brennan's house was located in Windermere, one of Seattle's most exclusive neighborhoods, where lakefront properties came with private docks and enough square footage to house small villages. Sarah pulled up to the gate in her aging Honda Civic, feeling profoundly out of place as she punched in the access code Catherine had provided. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, past gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. The house itself was modern, yet warm, lots of glass and natural wood, designed to blend with the surrounding trees while maintaining those million-dollar views of Lake Washington. Catherine met her at the front door, dressed more casually than in the office, but still impeccably styled. "Welcome. Let me show you around." The interior was stunning, but surprisingly livable. Yes, there was expensive art and furniture that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary, but there were also lived-in touches. Books stacked on side tables, a throw blanket draped over a leather couch, Tank's toys scattered near the fireplace. This was a home, not just a showcase. "Your office is this way?" Catherine led her down a hallway to a bright room overlooking the gardens. A desk was already set up with a computer, phone, and filing system. "Everything you need should be here, but if not, just ask. Mr. Brennan is in meetings downtown until 3. So I thought I'd get you oriented first." They spent the morning reviewing systems and schedules. Sarah learned that Brennan's household staff included a housekeeper who came 3 times a week, a landscaper, and a personal chef who prepared meals when Brennan was hosting. Her role would be coordinating all of them, plus managing Tank's care, handling personal errands, and generally ensuring that Brennan's home life ran smoothly. "He's extremely private," Catherine explained. "Doesn't trust easily. The fact that he hired you based on one interaction says something significant. Don't take that lightly." "I won't," Sarah promised, though the weight of that trust felt suddenly heavy. Tank had been shadowing them throughout the tour, cone-free now, his surgical site healing well. He stayed close to Sarah, occasionally bumping her hand with his nose as if confirming she was real. When Brennan arrived that afternoon, he found Sarah in her office, reviewing the calendar and making notes. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, Tank immediately trotting over to greet him. "How's your first day?" he asked. "Catherine's been incredibly helpful. I think I'm starting to understand the scope of things. Don't worry if it feels overwhelming at first. You'll find your rhythm." He paused, then added, "I have a dinner meeting tonight. Potential investors for a new development. Would you mind staying until 7 or so? Tank gets anxious when I'm gone too long, and I'd appreciate having someone here he's comfortable with." Of course, after Brennan left, Sarah sat with Tank in the living room, both of them watching the afternoon light play across the lake. The dog dozed with his head in her lap, content and peaceful, and Sarah felt the strangeness of her new reality settling around her. A month ago, her biggest concern was whether she'd get good tables on a Friday night. Now she was sitting in a multi-million-dollar house, trusted with the personal life of one of Seattle's most powerful men. Life was strange, but maybe strange could be good. Over the following weeks, Sarah settled into her new role with surprising ease. She coordinated Tank's follow-up vet appointments, managed household staff schedules, arranged for Brennan's dry cleaning, ordered groceries, and generally ensured that his home life operated seamlessly. But she also began to see beyond the surface. Marcus Brennan was a workaholic who often forgot to eat until Sarah reminded him. He was generous to his staff, but terrible at expressing appreciation directly. He had nightmares that sometimes woke Tank, who would then pace anxiously until Brennan calmed. He donated anonymously to animal shelters and environmental causes, but maintained a reputation for ruthlessness in business. He was disciplined, driven, and deeply lonely, though he'd never admit it. Sarah didn't pry, but she paid attention. And gradually, Brennan began to trust her with more than just logistics. One evening in late November, as Sarah was preparing to leave for the day, Brennan called her into his home office. He sat behind his desk, staring at architectural plans spread before him, his expression troubled. "I need your opinion on something," he said without preamble. Sarah approached, surprised. "My opinion? You're honest. You don't have an agenda. That's valuable." He gestured to the plans. "This is a development I'm considering in the Central District. Mixed use, apartments, retail space, community center. It's a historically black neighborhood that's being gentrified. I could make a lot of money building luxury condos, but this project would actually serve the existing community, provide affordable housing, create local jobs. It would also make significantly less profit." Sarah studied the plans, seeing the care that had gone into the design. "What does your head tell you?" "That the luxury condos are the smart business move." "And your heart?" He was quiet for a long moment. "That I have enough money, that maybe there are more important things." "Then build what your heart wants," Sarah said simply. "You don't need my permission, but if you're asking, that's my answer." Brennan looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "It's not that simple." "Sure it is. You're just afraid of looking soft." "I have a reputation. Reputations can change. You get to decide who you want to be, Mr. Brennan. Nobody else." He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "You sound like my mother." "Is that a good thing?" "She was the best person I ever knew." "So, yes." After that conversation, something shifted between them. Brennan began asking Sarah's opinion more frequently, not just on household matters, but on the decisions that weighed on him. She offered perspectives he hadn't considered, challenged assumptions he'd held for years, and refused to be intimidated by his reputation or wealth. In return, he began opening up, small revelations at first, then deeper ones. She learned that he'd grown up poor, that his father had been an abusive alcoholic, that he'd built his empire through sheer determination and a terror of ever being powerless again. Tank had been a rescue, nearly put down for aggression, and Brennan had seen himself in the dog, misunderstood, defensive, capable of loyalty, but only to those who earned it. "People think Tank is dangerous," Anna Brennan said one evening as they watched the dog play in the yard. "They cross the street, pull their kids closer, but he's never bitten anyone. He's just protective." "Like his owner," Sarah observed quietly. Brennan glanced at her sharply, then smiled. "Like his owner." December arrived with Seattle's typical gloom, endless rain, early darkness, temperatures hovering just above freezing. Sarah had been in her role for 2 months now, and it felt natural, as if she'd been doing this for years rather than weeks. She'd learned Brennan's rhythms, understood his moods, could anticipate his needs before he voiced them. But she'd also begun to realize something more complicated. She liked him. Not as an employer or even a friend exactly, but as a person who fascinated her, who challenged her to think differently, who made her want to be better. It was dangerous territory, and she knew it. One afternoon, as she was reviewing invoices in her office, Catherine appeared in the doorway, her expression serious. "We need to talk," the assistant said, closing the door behind her. "About Marcus." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "That depends on your perspective." Catherine sat across from Sarah, folding her hands. "I've worked for him for 8 years. I've seen assistants come and go. Most last a few months. A few make it to a year, but I've never seen him rely on anyone the way he's starting to rely on you. I'm just doing my job. It's more than that. He's letting his guard down." "That's not something Marcus does." Catherine's gaze was penetrating. "I'm not trying to scare you or make you uncomfortable, but you should understand what you're dealing with. Marcus Brennan is brilliant, generous in his own way, and capable of great kindness. He's also damaged in ways that most people don't see. If you're going to be in his inner circle, you need to be prepared for that. Sarah chose her words carefully. I appreciate the warning, but I'm not afraid of complicated people. Maybe you should be. Catherine stood, moving toward the door, then paused. He cares about you. He'd never say it, but I can tell. Please don't hurt him. He's had enough of that. After Catherine left, Sarah sat in silence, turning over the conversation. She hadn't sought this, whatever this was. She'd just tried to do her job well, to be present and helpful and honest, but somewhere along the way, the boundaries had blurred. That evening, Brennan worked late in his home office while Sarah organized files and responded to emails. Around 9, she brought him tea, Earl Grey, no sugar, exactly as he liked it, and found him staring out at the dark lake, tank at his feet. "You should go home," he said without turning. "It's late. So should you. When's the last time you slept a full night?" "I'll sleep when I'm dead." Sarah set the tea on his desk. "That's a terrible strategy." He turned, and she was struck by how exhausted he looked. Lines etched around his eyes, tension in his shoulders, a weariness that went bone deep. "Why do you stay?" he asked suddenly. "You could have left by now, taken the experience and gone somewhere easier." "Who says I want easier?" "Most people do." Sarah moved to stand beside him at the window, both of them reflected in the dark glass. "I grew up learning that nothing worthwhile comes easy. My parents worked that farm through droughts and floods and market crashes. They could have sold, moved to the city, found simpler lives. But that land mattered to them. Sometimes you stick with something not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. And this is worth it. Working for a difficult man with a damaged dog in a house too big for one person." She looked at him directly. Yes. The word hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to examine. Brennan's expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, vulnerability, something that might have been hope. "I'm going to kiss you," he said quietly. "If that's not okay, say so now." Sarah's heart hammered. This was the line, the point of no return. Crossing it would complicate everything, blur every professional boundary they'd maintained. It was reckless and probably foolish, and definitely against every rule of employer-employee relationships. "Okay," she whispered. He kissed her gently at first, almost tentatively, as if expecting her to pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned into him instead, the kiss deepened, became something urgent and real. His hands cupped her face, and she felt the tension in him begin to dissolve, replaced by something softer. When they finally broke apart, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. "This is probably a terrible idea." "Probably," Sarah agreed. "I don't want to be your employer anymore. I want—" He stopped, struggling for words. "I don't know what this is, but I want to find out." "Me too." Tank, watching from his spot by the desk, let out a contented sigh, as if to say, "Finally." The next morning, Sarah woke in Brennan's bed, sunlight streaming through the massive windows. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory returned, the kiss, the conversation that had stretched into the early hours, the decision to stop pretending they were just employer and employee. Brennan was already awake, sitting up against the headboard with his laptop, Tank sprawled across his feet. He glanced over as Sarah stirred, and a smile transformed his usually stern expression. "Morning," he said. "What time is it?" 7:30. I let you sleep. Figured you deserved it after I kept you up past midnight." Sarah stretched, feeling oddly comfortable despite the surreal situation. No regrets. About last night, none. He set the laptop aside, giving her his full attention. "But we should probably talk about what this means going forward." "Probably," Sarah agreed, sitting up. I'm guessing we can't exactly maintain a boss-employee relationship anymore. Catherine can take over your official duties. You'd still have access to everything, still be involved, but without the formal structure. He hesitated, then added, unless you'd rather not. If this changes your mind about staying. It doesn't. Sarah touched his arm. But we need to be smart about this. Your reputation, your business. I don't want to complicate any of that. Let me worry about my reputation. Brennan's expression turned serious. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, maintaining distance, never letting anyone too close. It's exhausting, Sarah, and lonely. I'm tired of being lonely. The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This was Marcus Brennan, stripped of his armor, raw and honest, in a way she suspected few people ever saw. Then don't be, she said simply. I'm right here. Over the following weeks, they navigated their new reality carefully. Publicly, Sarah transitioned from assistant to a deliberately vague role that gave her access to Brennan's world without the formal employer-employee structure. Catherine managed the logistics with professional discretion, never commenting on the change, though her knowing look suggested she'd seen it coming. Privately, Sarah and Brennan built something that felt both fragile and surprisingly solid. They had dinner together most evenings, talking about everything from childhood memories to philosophical debates about wealth and responsibility. She accompanied him to some events, stayed home from others, learning to read when he needed her presence and when he needed to handle things alone. Tank, naturally, was thrilled with the arrangement. He split his time between them, seeming to understand that Sarah was now a permanent fixture rather than a temporary guest. But not everything was smooth. Brennan's past cast long shadows, his trust issues, his tendency to retreat when emotions ran high, his difficulty accepting help or admitting weakness. Sarah had her own struggles too, adjusting to wealth, navigating social situations far outside her comfort zone, dealing with the occasional cruel gossip from people who assumed she was a gold digger. One particularly difficult evening in late January, they attended a gala for one of Brennan's charitable foundations. Sarah wore a dress that cost more than her former monthly rent, borrowed jewelry that required insurance, and felt like an imposter the entire night. She caught snippets of conversation, whispered speculation about who she was, how long she'd last, whether Brennan was slumming or having a midlife crisis. By the time they returned home, Sarah was exhausted and fighting back tears. She'd tried so hard to fit in, to say the right things and laugh at the right moments, and still felt like a failure. Hey, Brennan caught her arm as she headed toward the bedroom. Talk to me. I'm fine. You're not. He guided her to the couch, sat beside her. What happened? Nothing, just people talking. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. His voice was gentle. What did they say? Sarah hesitated, then let it spill out. That I'm using you. That I saw an opportunity and grabbed it. That you're too smart to be fooled for long, but everyone has blind spots. Brennan's expression darkened. Who said that? It doesn't matter who. It matters to me. Marcus, you can't fight every person who gossips. That's not how this works. He was quiet for a moment, jaw tight. Then, slowly, his anger seemed to deflate. You're right, but I hate that you had to hear it. I hate that people assume the worst. People always assume the worst, Sarah said tiredly. It's safer than hoping for the best. Is that what you're doing? Hoping for the best? She looked at him, this complicated, brilliant man who'd somehow become essential to her happiness. Yes, every day. Brennan pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him, drawing strength from his presence. They sat like that for a long time, Tank eventually joining them on the couch, the three of them forming their own small, imperfect family. I love you, Brennan said quietly. I should have said it before now, but I'm saying it now. I love you. Sarah's breath caught. You don't have to. I'm not saying it because I think I should. I'm saying it because it's true. He turned to face her fully. You walked into my life and refused to be intimidated. You saw past the walls I'd built, challenged me to be better, made me believe I could be more than just the ruthless businessman everyone expects. You saved Tank. You saved me too, even if you don't realize it. I just paid attention, Sarah whispered. Exactly. You paid attention when everyone else looked away. That's why I love you. I love you too, Sarah said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. Even though you're difficult and stubborn and terrible at expressing emotions, he laughed. I never claimed to be perfect. Good. I prefer you imperfect. They made love that night with an intensity born of vulnerability and trust. And afterward, as Sarah drifted towards sleep, she felt something settle inside her, a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. This strange life she'd stumbled into was hers now, complications and all. And the spring arrived in Seattle with its usual dramatic flair, cherry blossoms exploding along neighborhood streets, tulips blooming in parks, the rain finally easing into drizzle and eventually sun. Sarah and Brennan had been together for 6 months now, navigating the complexities of their relationship with increasing confidence. The Central District Development Project had broken ground, and Brennan threw himself into ensuring it lived up to his promises. Sarah often accompanied him to community meetings, watching as he listened to residents' concerns and adjusted plans accordingly. The ruthless developer reputation was fading, replaced by something more nuanced, a businessman who could be tough when necessary but wasn't defined solely by profit margins. Tank, fully recovered from his surgery, had become something of a neighborhood celebrity. Children who once gave him a wide berth now asked to pet him during walks. Elderly residents paused to chat with Brennan, commenting on what a good dog Tank was, how nice it was to see them. The transformation wasn't just in how people saw Tank, but how they saw Brennan too. One Saturday morning in April, Sarah woke to find Brennan already dressed, standing at the bedroom window with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What's wrong?" she asked, joining him. "Nothing's wrong. I've been thinking." He turned to face her. "About us, about the future." Sarah's stomach tightened with sudden anxiety. "Okay. I've never been good at this. The domestic stuff, relationships, planning beyond quarterly reports. But you've changed that. You've made me want things I'd written off as impossible." "Marcus, what are you saying?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Sarah's breath stopped. "I'm saying I want to marry you," Brennan continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm saying I want you to be my wife, not my employee or girlfriend or any other inadequate label. I'm saying I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore, and I don't want to try." He opened the box, revealing a ring, elegant, simple, with a single diamond that caught the morning light. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me?" For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. Her mind raced through the past 6 months, the challenges, the joys, the steady building of something real between them. This wasn't a fairy tale where the poor girl married the rich prince. This was messier, more complicated, built on mutual respect and genuine love. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, I'll marry you." Brennan's relief was visible as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if made specifically for her, which, she'd later learn, it had been. He'd worked with a jeweler for weeks, describing her personality, her preferences, wanting something that reflected who she actually was rather than what expense dictated. They stood together at the window, Tank joining them and pressing against their legs, and Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. A simple act of paying attention to a suffering dog had changed everything, her job, her home, her entire life trajectory. That afternoon, they drove to Eastern Washington to tell Sarah's family in person. Her parents' farm looked exactly as she remembered. The old farmhouse with its wraparound porch, fields stretching to the horizon, her brother's trucks parked in the driveway. Her mother cried when she heard the news, pulling Sarah into a fierce hug. Her father shook Brennan's hand with careful assessment, then said, "You hurt my daughter, and I don't care how much money you have, we'll have words." "I wouldn't expect anything less, sir," Brennan replied evenly. They stayed for dinner, pot roast and mashed potatoes. Simple food that Brennan praised with genuine enthusiasm. Sarah's brothers grilled him mercilessly about his intentions, his business, whether he knew how to change a tire or field dress a deer. To his credit, Brennan held his own, answering honestly, even when the truth made him look less capable. "I like him," Sarah's mother told her while they washed dishes. "He's a good man underneath all that polish." "He is," Sarah agreed. "It took me a while to see it, but he is." "You always did have a talent for seeing what others missed," her mother smiled. "Your father was furious when you dropped out of college, but I told him, Sarah knows what she's doing. She always lands on her feet. I got lucky." "Luck is what you make of it, honey. You paid attention when others didn't. That's not luck, that's wisdom." The wedding was planned for September, small and intimate despite Brennan's wealth. They chose a venue on Whidbey Island with views of Puget Sound and the Olympics. The guest list included family, close friends, and key staff like Catherine, who'd become more friend than employee over the months. Sarah's brothers served as bridesmaids, or bridesmen, as they preferred, much to everyone's amusement. Tank, naturally, was the ring-bearer, wearing a bow tie and carrying the rings in a small pouch attached to his collar. The ceremony itself was simple but emotional. Brennan, usually so composed, got choked up during his vows. Sarah made it through hers without crying, but barely. When the officiant pronounced them married, the applause was genuine and warm. At the reception, Brennan's business associates mingled with Sarah's family, creating odd but pleasant conversational combinations. One of her brothers was explaining combine mechanics to a tech investor. Her mother was deep in discussion about animal rescue with Catherine. Tank worked the room like a politician, collecting pets and treats with shameless efficiency. During their first dance, Brennan pulled Sarah close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not being afraid, for taking a chance on a difficult man with a damaged dog." Sarah smiled. "Tank's not damaged. He just needed the right person to understand him." "I wasn't talking about Tank." "I know." They danced slowly, surrounded by people who mattered, building a moment they'd both remember. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. There would be challenges ahead, conflicts to navigate, the ongoing work of building a life together, but they'd face it as partners, with Tank beside them, and the knowledge that sometimes the most important things start with simply paying attention. 5 years later, Sarah stood in the community center at the Central District Development, watching children play in the after-school program Brennan had funded. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, designed to serve the neighborhood rather than impose upon it. Local artists had painted murals on the walls. Residents ran the programs. It was everything Brennan had promised, and more. "They're going to dedicate the new wing next month," Catherine said, joining her. "The one for job training and adult education." "He'll try to skip the ceremony," Sarah predicted. "He will, and you'll make him go anyway." "Damn right I will." Catherine laughed. "You're good for him, you know. He's softer now, not weak. He's still Marcus Brennan, but more human." "We're all more human with the right people around us," Sarah said. She'd continued working with Brennan's charitable foundation, focusing on animal welfare and community development. It turned out that paying attention, the skill that had changed her life, was useful in many contexts. She listened to what communities needed rather than assuming. She watched for problems others overlooked. She built genuine relationships rather than transactional ones. Tank, now 9 years old and greying around the muzzle, still accompanied them most places. He'd slowed down, but remained alert and affectionate. The cancer hadn't returned, and his vet said he was in excellent health for his age. That evening, Sarah and Brennan had dinner at home. Just the two of them and Tank as they preferred. The house, once too large for one person, now felt right. They'd filled it with life and laughter, friends and family, the accumulated warmth of years spent building something meaningful. "I saw the news about the Portland project," Sarah mentioned over dessert. "Looks like it's moving forward." Brennan nodded. "Same model as the Central District. Affordable housing, community input, local jobs. It won't make as much money as traditional development, but it's worth it anyway." "Exactly," he smiled. "I'm learning. We both are." After dinner, they walked Tank along the lake, enjoying the mild September evening. Other walkers called greetings. Dogs strained against leashes to visit with Tank, and Sarah felt the contentment that came with being exactly where she belonged. "Do you ever think about that night at the restaurant?" Brennan asked suddenly. "What would have happened if you hadn't paid attention to Tank?" "Sometimes, but there's no point in dwelling on roads not taken. Still, I think about it. You had no reason to get involved. Tank wasn't your problem. I wasn't your problem. You could have just brought the check and left." Sarah considered this. "Maybe, but I've learned that the most important moments in life often look insignificant at the time. You don't know you're changing everything when you bend down to examine a dog. You're just doing what seems right in the moment. And it changed everything. For both of us." They walked in comfortable silence, Tank trotting ahead to investigate interesting smells. The sun was setting over the Olympics, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Boats dotted the lake, their lights beginning to twinkle as darkness approached. "I love you," Brennan said, as he did every day now. He'd gotten better at expressing emotion, though it still didn't come naturally. But he tried, and that meant everything. "I love you too," Sarah replied. "Difficult man and all. Difficult woman." "We're perfect for each other then," Tank barked, as if agreeing with this assessment, and they laughed together, two people who'd found each other through the simplest of actions. Paying attention when others didn't. Years would continue to pass. They'd weather storms and celebrate victories. The Central District project would become a model for ethical development nationwide. Tank would eventually pass away peacefully at 12, surrounded by people who loved him, and they'd adopt another rescue, a Pitbull mix named Stella, who was just as misunderstood as Tank had been. Sarah's parents would retire and move closer to Seattle. Her brothers would marry and have children who'd call Brennan Uncle Marcus without any awareness of his wealth or reputation. But on this particular September evening, none of that was knowable. There was only the present moment, a walk along the lake, a dog padding happily ahead, two people who'd built something real and lasting from the smallest of beginnings. Sometimes life's most significant changes start with simple acts. A waitress bends down to examine a suffering dog. An intimidating man lets his guard drop for just a moment. A connection forms in the space between fear and trust, and everything shifts. Nobody had dared get near the boss's Pitbull until Sarah did. And in doing so, she'd discovered not just what the dog needed, but what they both needed. Understanding, compassion, the courage to be vulnerable with someone who wouldn't weaponize that vulnerability. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real.